Sometimes I work on a painting and I start with an idea of, let's say, global expansion or global warming or climate change. I'll start with something that is specific. But I also draw a lot and use models where I'm just drawing the model, and I'll get a pose that I really like, and then I turn that into a painting. And so usually the pose will inspire something that I want to do. So in this painting, I have a model who I really like and does fantastic gestures when she's modeling. Her movements are beautiful. And so she did a movement, she did a pose, and I really liked it, and I worked on it. Usually I have spiritual connections with my paintings. So I'll use gods from different religions, Buddhism or Hinduism. So with this, I looked for a god that would be, or a goddess that would be in water. And I came up with a Greek goddess by the name of Opolaya. Her actual name is Opolaya. And she's the daughter of Poseidon. I liked the model's hair. She had phenomenal hair. And so I wanted to get the feeling of movement and hair. And I used fabric and mixed it with paint and put it on the canvas. I also wanted the frame to look something like the Earth and some geodes of the Earth. So I have a hematite geode, and what I did was I tried to mimic the geode in the frame. So if you look at this, it's a much smaller scale, and it has these cube-like forms, and it has a slight glitter to it. I was really fascinated by the way that the Earth constructs crystals, and so I wanted to duplicate the crystal on the frame to give the idea of something very ancient and something that would have been formed eons ago. When you look at the history of the Earth, it's a point where all the continents were underwater. They were all under the ocean. You couldn't see them at all. And gradually, as the Earth expanded, the water became where the continents were. The continents started to come closer and closer to the surface. And they came closer to the surface. It enabled life to develop in ways that it wasn't able to when the oceans were very deep. When the oceans were very deep, if life, plant life or animal life became too large, it would sink to the bottom. There was no nutrition, there was no light there. But with the continents rising, the ocean getting shallower, life could start to develop and change in scale and become larger. So when you look at the history of the Earth's life, you can see that at the beginning it was minuscule, tiny, and gradually it started to develop. And this is the time when the continents were rising and life was basically starting to develop into what we know in the oceans today. When I was working with my theory of global expansion, I talked to different geologists, and one of the geologists that I spoke to was Dr. James Maxlow in Australia, in Perth, Australia. And his theory of expansion correlated a little bit what I was talking about and what my theory was, but he believed that water only came to Earth about 400 million years ago. And that to me seemed to be a problem, because where would we get all this water from? Although we do get water today coming with comets or meteors that hit the Earth, asteroids that hit the Earth contain water, frozen water and ice. And that was one way we get water. But my belief was that water must have been here before that. So I started looking at how water behaves and how it would possibly have stayed with the Earth as it went through periods of heating and cooling and expansion. And what I found was that water changes its nature under different pressures and temperatures. And if you increase the pressure dramatically, what would be boiling or steam today would be ice under a different pressure. And if the pressure increases greatly, it would turn into a different form. It wouldn't even have the same spacing of the molecules. It would become a substance which would be possibly as hard as diamonds. And there's a graph that I've got, and you can see on the graph that there's, I think, 10 or 11, there's 11 different types of ice, depending on what the pressure is and what the temperature is. So water reasonably would have always been with Earth. And as the temperatures and pressures changed and Earth became more like it is today, we started to have liquid water on Earth rather than frozen, even though the temperature may have been a lot higher.